Welcome to Leadership Development News, profiles and practices of top performers. I'm Dr. Nadler. Dr. Kathy Greenberg, my esteemed co-host. We now have been doing this for 20 years, and we're excited about it. We used to be called a radio show, and then, I don't know, Kat, how many years ago that we switched to a podcast, but that we've been doing this for a long time. We probably have 700, 800 shows that we've done, and we're always trying to bring you tips, tools from people who can add to your productivity, add to who you are as a leader. And this idea of doing a few things differently can help you be in the top 10%. And Kathy and I have been working with thousands of leaders, over our years. And so we're excited to talk about traits to be mastered for organizational success. Patrick Rainey and Dr. Cappy Leland, and we're going to pick their brain about their book and about a lot of things about culture that they're going to be able to bring to us. Kat, welcome to the show.
Hey there, it's funny every time we talk about being on the air for 20 years, you and I talk about that like it's, not a big thing. I was at a women's conference last week before last in New York, and I don't think of it as something that's really important, but I just happened to mention it to a couple of people, and they were like, 20 years? I didn't know podcasts have been around for 20 years,
Right. They
right?
weren't called that then. Yeah.
No,
Wow.
but it's fascinating to me. And I hear today we're going to have I think some students from the College of Executive Coaching, which you've been around for, I guess, quite some time as well. So I'm very excited to hear
Yeah.
about Pat and Cappy's work, and I just want to dive in if that's okay.
Okay, good, good. Yeah, yeah. So Pat Rainey, I know from the College of Executive Coaching, we're going to introduce him and Dr. Cappy Leland and about their book that they have, Sail or Sink, and then just to really pick their brain about what they're doing in organizations. They have some proprietary tools that we're going to talk about. So, but before we get started, you heard us talk about that everything is more. And so whatever's going on, if you put the more sign in front of it, so more stress, more uh, anxiety, more pain, more loneliness, more heightened emotions, more divisiveness. So whatever it is, put the more sign in front of it, and that's what we have. And so as leaders, we really want to be able to help people manage the more. I like that, Cat. Manage the more.
Yep.
MT, MTM, we'll have an acronym about that, manage the more. And one of the things that we advocate in our book, if you're watching this on YouTube, Kat has Emotional Brilliance, the book that she and I co-wrote. We have a tool about how to manage the more, and it's called NAME, N-A-M-E. What do you do with all these emotions? Well, the N is you notice it and you put a name to it, you label it. The A is you accept it, even though it's hard for us to accept some of these emotions. How do you lean in? And then the M is manage. And what do you manage? Thoughts. And then you manage actions. In there, we have a lot of different ways to manage thoughts, a lot of different ways to manage actions. And then the E is express. Who do you express it to? Well, often we've expressed these emotions to the wrong person, and we go, all they did is give me advice. Or all they tell you is, don't worry about it. That didn't work. So that's one of our tools, and we won't go too much into that, but I'll just say last thing, and then Kat, anything you want to respond. In the World Economic Forum just came out in 2025, and it talked about some of the core skills in 2030, 4 years from now, with the AI influence. Well, guess what? Some of the skills are still in that EI world: talent management, leadership, things that we may not think about 4 or 5 years now in the AI world. So the things we talk about on the show, the things we talk about in our research is going to be continue to be valuable in 2030. So Kat, any quick words you want to say, and then we'll bring them on?
No, I think you covered it really well. The thing that really sticks out for me, which I just want to impress upon our listeners, first of all, you have three graduates of the College of Executive Coaching, I guess, here, and one instructor. Even though I'm a faculty, I don't consider myself, a full-time instructor there. But I think, as you're talking, what we are noticing is that we are still in a woeful state of global energy crisis when it comes to human energy. And I think now more than ever before, and I'm interested to hear what both Cappy and Pat have to say about it, this is not going to change. And the ability for us as human beings to understand that we are living in a heightened, I'll just say, mental health environment. And we see it in everything that's going on in the media with regard to the interface with both the military and public services professionals, law enforcement, where I focus. And I think that it's going to be a very interesting discussion today with some, licensed independent providers here with regard to how all of us can get better at assessing, reflecting, managing, and doing more with less of what our brains are actually used to coping with. So this is going to be a pretty intense,
Yeah.
I think.
Well, and I think around the last thing I'll say, and then if you want to introduce Cappy, and then I'll introduce Pat. The last thing I'll say is from emotional intelligence, 6 Seconds, who we've had on the show numerous times, and then one of the key researchers around emotional intelligence, there's an emotional recession. And the kind of the optimism has been less. Emotional intelligence has gone down in points, and basically the theme of this, people have lost their spark. And I think the things that we're going to talk about with Cappy and Pat are ways to bring back that spark.
Fantastic. Well, let me jump in here, and I'm sure we're going to hear how you got named Cappy. But let me start with an introduction of Charles Arthur Leland, aka Cappy, who received a
Yeah.
doctorate at Oklahoma State University in higher education and individual and family therapy studies. He founded Performance Dashboard Inc. He began his career as a licensed independent provider of psychotherapy services, of which I need a lot. He later served as clinical director and CEO of organizations treating psychiatric, alcohol, drug, and eating disorders. His practice evolved into industrial psychology as an organizational development advisor and consultant, and his work in behavioral health and psychometric assessments led to the creation of a diagnostic called the Organizational Effectiveness Survey, the OES. Furthermore, Cappy is the developer of a model that sets forth 3 steps for strategic planning and performance management, which we all need. The model is called AIM, AIM, Align People, Implement Strategies, and Measure Performance. Both methodologies have won widespread recognition, and his awards include Innovator of the Year from the Journal Record of Oklahoma, finalist in the 2008 Oklahoma Governor's Cup competition, and best practices by the Association for Continuing Higher Education. He's obviously got a range of clients, works on boards of directors, and works with senior and middle management leaders. He services organizations across the US and Canada. And he also works across universities, government agencies, Fortune 100 companies, nonprofits, leadership and organizational development firms, and our very important family-owned entrepreneurs and businesses. So welcome to the show, Cappy.
Thank
Cap-
you. Thank you very much.
And Cappy, I have a similar background for me in clinical psychology, and then switched to organizations a long time ago. And let me just say a quick little intro for Patrick Rainey. He is the field perspective author of the book. So Pat, we're going to delve into what does that mean. Graduate of Brigham Young University and Purdue. He's got an MBA. He's experienced in organizational development as a consultant. He's certified, and we went through a lot of classes together, and Pat was great at the College of Executive Coaching around coaching, but also team coaching. He's a Gallup certified strength coach. He has C-suite experience in marketing, finance, human resources, leadership development. He served on boards, played a leadership role in raising capital. In writing his field perspectives, Pat drew on his experience working as a management consultant, executive coach, from his background as a founder, an investor, and an owner of the company that he has with Cappy. And I guess you came on in 2012 as the president and service clients who often include videography, videography, or videography. You can help me on that one. His videos and edits clients' cultural stories. So we can delve into that. Helps clients promote their brands by developing and executing a custom digital strategy for the myriad of social media and platforms. So maybe let's start off, and Cappy, we'll go to you, and we're going to flip flop back and forth so we give equal time.
Okay.
How did you guys come together and work together? Like what was the inception of this?
Well, how we initially came together was I've been working with his brother, Rob Rainey. Uh,
Oh,
Rob was the chairman of the board of the Oklahoma Board of Corrections. And so I went through some personal challenges in my life. And I came to Rob and I said, you know, I, I just think that I need to be able to supplement what I do with marketing and finance and business development and to be able to brainstorm with somebody else and bring in some partners. And he said, okay. And really nothing happened after that. And then all of a sudden he said, hey, he said, my brother, just I think sold a company and he's looking for something to do. And so we talked and you see the results.
beautiful.
Very, very good partner.
I know what that feels like when you have a really good partner.
Yeah.
And
20,
and or
20 years
partner.
worth.
Yeah, it does.
So let me hear your side of the story, Pat.
Yes, I probably wouldn't have brought up my brother, the lawyer, but
Oh
since it's
boy.
out there, a lawyer did bring us together.
Yes,
And
yes.
as somebody who, you know, 15 years ago, I would have said I'm a startup guy, and been on a number of boards at that point, and really love startups and raising capital and finding investors, and that was a process that I enjoyed.
Mhm.
But the part when I really stripped it all away, the part that I enjoyed the most about being in the C-suite and running my own companies or being part of a board or building a hospital or whatever else that I've done in my career, I think the part I enjoyed the most was the one-on-one engagement and watching people figure out how to succeed and being part of helping people figure out what's getting in their way to success. And that's how I wound up going the direction I did and meeting Relly, because the coaching was an avenue to realize that aspiration, right? Which you guys are both very familiar with. So Cappy and I met Cappy and we came together, and I realized that he had some skill sets, significant skill sets that I didn't have. And, really, I reflect on conversations you and I have had along the way about the role of being a therapist or a psychologist, and how that fits and doesn't fit with coaching. And I always, early on, when I was taking on clients that wanted to talk about all their problems, uh, it was always great to have Cappy there where I could go to him and say, Where's the line here? Because
yeah.
and I know that's stuff that you guys deal with all the time, and it was a beautiful thing to really have Cappy there as a sounding board. I mean, he talks about me as a sounding board in some
Yeah.
ways, but stuff like that has been really important to our relationship.
Well, we talk about the different strengths that you bring, and I know, so when you say, and I said it in the intro for you, that you bring in the field perspective, say a little bit about that, and then we'll flip flop to some questions for Cappy.
Well, sure. Uh, well, Cappy's, as you can see, he has had a pile of clients over the years in all kinds of different businesses and organizations, private and not for profit. And then he I guess I would define it this way, and thinking about our more recent history. He took some time. He has client work, but he took a lot of time. He was the lead author on the book. And so, as you guys know, I mean, it's hard to be a seller doer. You know, find clients, sell to clients,
Hmm.
and execute on a book. It becomes it consuming and takes up your lifetime. And so we decided that my contribution to the book would be able to reflect on what's going on in the field, what's going on out there in the real world with clients.
Yeah.
And because of the difference of time demands, I was the one who had more client work going on while Cappy was writing the book. So that's why we called it Field Perspectives.
Beautiful. Well, I can't continue without understanding where the nickname Cappy came from.
Well, my mother told me that she grew up on a farm and she had this favorite cow, and she named it Cappy. And I said, okay, that works for me. And I like the name Cappy. I
Yeah.
really didn't like the name Charles. I was in third grade in gym class, and Mr. Cagle was a gym teacher, and he would call the roll. And one day he called and said Charles, and nobody answered. And he said Charles, and I was in third grade, and he looks at me and he goes Charles, and and I said, well, I said my name's Cappy. And he said, well, Cappy is a baby's name, so I'm going to call you Charles. And I
Oh.
can't believe I said this. I looked at him very calmly and I said, well, you can call me Charles. I just want to answer the roll.
That's that's very telling. That's good.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, all of us like a little, I'll just call it nickname. I like people to call me Cat because
Oh, okay.
I like it and it's easy, right? Cappy to me is charming, and being in a world full of military and tactical
Yeah.
operators,
Yeah.
Cappy would be somebody, who obviously was a captain or, somebody who
Right.
was in a leadership role, and they just decided we liked it enough to take it into the civilian world. So that's why I asked. I'm glad I did.
So
Oh, thank
before
you. Thank
before we
you.
go to a break, because I don't know if you got a chance to say this, yeah. So if talk about names, Relly is short for Rel Dan, and I don't know if you know this, Cappy. Rel Dan, if you and you can see it on the computer here, is my last name spelled backwards. So
Oh my God.
Nadler, and so I'm a human palindrome. And my dad, Cappy, you appreciate this with a funny name. He got Rel Dan and said, sounds like a real name. So when I do keynotes and stuff, I start off with a name story, have everybody spell their name backwards. I said, would this be a pet, person, pharmaceutical drug, or
Yes.
password? And most of it's pharmaceutical drug or password. So from Rel Dan, it could have been Danny, but instead everybody knows me as Relly.
Mm-hmm.
You know what,
That's
we're
a
gonna,
good story.
yeah, I'm sure we're gonna get back into, some of our personal nuances, especially when writing a book. Man, you really learn a lot about somebody when you're writing a book together. But we'll hold that thought for a minute while we go to a quick break. Don't go away. You're listening to Leadership Development News. We're having a delightful conversation today with two authors of the book, Sail or Sink. Come right back.
Welcome, folks, back to Leadership Development News, Profiles and Practice of Top Performers. We're talking with Cappy and Pat here about their book, Sail or Sink. And so let's delve into this. And Cappy, let's go to the question for you. So what is Sail or Sink? And you were during the break saying a little bit, it sounds like it's a book you've been working on, but say a little bit for our audience about when it came out, what it's about, and then how they can get it.
Okay, well, it came out in 2024. You can buy it on Amazon, and it's in 4 different genres. You can get an ebook, you can get a paperback, hardback, and then there's also an audio version, an audio book for you too, with access to in your library of PDFs of all the forms and charts.
Oh, that's great. So what is it about?
Well, Sail or Sink is, based on over 20 years of research using our validated diagnostic assessment, the Organizational Effectiveness Survey, which Kathy and you talked about, called the OES earlier. And so through hundreds of companies and thousands of employees in our research, we discovered that every organization's culture is shaped by 3 traits. There's relational behaviors, those soft skills, how people care and treat each other. And then there's the operational practices. Those are those hard skills, how we get the work done. And then the third diagnostic trait overlooked in the business and leadership literatures is the organization's immune system or resilient skills. Now, some of those books talk about flexibility and adaptability and so on and so forth. But as of now, nobody, at least that I've been able to track down, has talked about being able to measure the organization's immune system, at least naming it an immune system. And then Sail or Sink explains how that immune system is different from the human immune system, and basically how it detects the undercurrents of threats or change that, if not caught soon enough, can negatively impact an organization's overall performance, their growth, and their financial results. And from the interaction of those 3 traits, the hard skills, the soft skills, and the immune system, we identify 4 culture types. The first one is interpersonal, and that's how people care and treat each other. The opposite of that is relentless and how the work gets done. And then there's a culture that's called detached, and that's where neither the people nor the performance thrive. And then last but not least, where most organizations, you aspire to become, is engaged, where there's healthy soft skills, there's effective hard skills, and resilience thrives. And one of the biggest insights that we've learned over the years is that organizations don't fail suddenly. They drift there. So Sail or Sink helps leaders recognize those hidden undercurrent early warning signs and help them navigate their organization toward lasting success.
Let me just go back and make sure that I'm understanding the 4 types.
Okay.
So you said the first one was interpersonal. And the second one I missed.
Oh, the second one is relentless. That's the opposite of interpersonal. That's looking at how they get the work done, those hard skills. So you've got the interpersonal, that's the soft caring skills. Those are the relational behaviors. Do we work and play well with each other? And then the relentless is, focus on execution, getting results. We don't necessarily, have to like you. We just want to get the work done and win the game.
Okay. Yeah. And then the third one is detached.
Detached, that's usually when you have, using the OES, low scores in those soft skills and low scores in those operational skills. So they're necessarily just kind of trying their best to just stay afloat if they aren't sinking. That's usually when you look, it's kind of like, I know this is going to sound bad, but it's kind of like having a fire. You go to a fire and the fire department gets there and they say, well, it's going to burn to the ground. And I don't think you necessarily need to be concerned about that. What you need to do is have an investor investigator come in and figure out, how it burned down.
Mhm.
So detached just means you're really struggling in those people skills and getting the job done. And eventually, unless you pull up and out, that you will sink, have death, that could be mergers, acquisitions, closing the doors.
And then the fourth one is engaged.
Yeah.
The fourth one is engaged, and that's blending the relational behaviors and the operational practices, those hard skills. Would you like me to kind of break it out a little bit more?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. So, when you look at an interpersonal culture, you're looking at those soft, caring relationship skills, and their preferred strengths are easily to understand: healthy, caring relationships. And their culture theme is that the people are feeling good, but they're losing the game in players because they're low on those getting the results, those hard skills. And so we can go into the quality of those kind of leaders a little bit later, but going to the relentless culture, they're focused on what? Those hard result-driven skills. And their preferred strengths are the people are feeling their preferred strengths are getting results, no excuses. Performance, no excuses. Their culture theme is what's happening inside the organization is people are feeling bad and they're losing players, but they're winning the game. So those are two opposite and competing cultures. And based on one's temperament and character, an individual, they'll either be a fit and they'll like it, or they won't. And if they don't, they usually leave or they're fired.
Yeah.
Then the third is the engaged culture, which is really the fourth one, because I already talked about the detached culture. But it builds on the strengths and the advantages of the interpersonal and relentless cultures. So, of course, their strength is they're healthy, they're effective, and they're resilient. And the theme around that is the people are feeling good, they're winning the game, and if they haven't won the championship, they're going for the championship.
That's great, Cappy. I can see a little bit of the influence of the family system studies, into organizational systems, which is really great.
And it's interesting that you say that, because as we were writing the book and we were getting a lot of help from and feedback and consulting with other people in the behavioral science field and in the business world, one of the things that came out is, wow, you can use this model for family dynamics.
Yeah.
And you really can.
Yeah. And I know with family systems, the open systems, closed systems, and all those. So, Pat, kind of question for you, about defining culture. And then Cappy was talking about some of the early warning signs. So maybe if you could help kind of define what is culture in this setting, that you have in your book, Sail or Sink. And then Cappy mentioned these early warning signs. I think that would be helpful for our audience.
Well, so yeah, thank you. And by the way, congratulations to both of you on your 20 years doing this. That's really, I do think that's a big deal, especially nowadays. So congrats for that.
Thank you.
So in the book, we first of all, culture, as you guys know, culture, you can, just Google it, Chat GPT or whatever. There's a lot of definitions for culture. And it can be a complex topic with a lot of different bunny trails that you can go down with culture. But we feel like our angle here, our claim to some fame, I guess you might say, is that we think this can be simplified, and measuring culture can be simplified. And in the book, we define it as a pattern of behaviors norms and expectations that guide how employees treat each other and carry out the work inside the organization. And even simpler would be culture is the way people behave and interact as they accomplish their work together.
Okay.
Very simple. You know, here are a couple of points that I would make about culture that that would also lead to some of these, what did you call them, red lines or warning,
early warning
warning
signs.
system. Yeah. So um, one, culture is behavioral. It's not just philosophical. And so with the OES, we are measuring the hard skills and the soft skills and the immune system. And we're looking at those as behavioral indexes, I guess you'd say. Culture is experienced by employees and not necessarily defined by leadership statements, right? And so going to the comment about field perspectives, it's on Cappy and my mind a lot, a client that we have worked with and talk about a lot, where they have a relentless culture. And they often come up with statements or mantras about their culture that don't really reflect what's going on inside the culture, right? Because they're not in tune enough with what's going on. Their statements might be how they want the culture to be, but the way their culture is being experienced by the employees is different than their leadership statements. Another comment, culture determines whether an organization sails or sinks. Cappy said this because it shapes engagement, trust, and performance. And then the OES measures culture by measuring behaviors, not opinions about values. So, you know, in terms of, I don't know, it's interesting to me from my own experience. Trust is everything. Everything,
Right.
literally. And if you're in a engaged culture where these forces are in balance, you don't even think about trust. It's like the air, it's there.
Yeah.
But guess what? If that air is gone, if that trust is gone, that's all you can think about. So, you know, I mean, in terms of a starting point, you know, I ask leaders a lot, what do you think trust is like in your organization? And if you could put a number on it, how do you think your employees feel about that? And do you feel like as a leader, you are trusted?
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, that if you asking an open-ended question like that, it goes everywhere, right? It's a big deal.
So I guess one of the things that's coming up for me is I've unfortunately been around long enough to have, you know, read a lot about organization culture and what we need to do to make it effective and results driven while helping to create psychological safety for the people inside of the community. So how does what you are doing with organizational effectiveness surveys and some of the stories in the book, how does this deal from differ from the original work of people like John Cotter and others who kind of, you know, were the early pioneers in this area?
So you're talking about change and transition?
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about? And dealing with change and transition and how people deal with what's going on in the organization?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's talking about change, right? And there's, in order to be able to have new beginnings, you have to have endings. And so you've got endings, the status quo, where all the arrows were going in the same direction. And then leadership decides you want to have a new beginning. And we can talk about that later of, how in the world do they look at, uh, changing their culture? And there's steps to being able to do that. We can get at that later. But so before you get to beginnings, you've got to have endings, and people resist that endings a lot to get into a new beginning. But in between the endings and new beginnings is what we call transitions, where all the arrows are going all the different ways. And so that's where the anxiety and the not just stress, but distress happens. A lot of mistrust going on. People don't know, when the next shoe is going to drop. I mean, it's just like chaos and anxiety. But out of that comes new observations and innovations. And that starts the new beginning.
Yeah.
And, sometimes you have to burn the ships, completely burn everything down to be out of new beginnings. There was one story about a senior executive was coming in, is going to change their culture, and he called all the vice presidents together. And he had a big stack of papers on his desk. And this is all about their process and system procedures, so on and so forth. And he just literally pushed them off on the floor. That's an ending. Now we need to look at the new beginning.
Yeah.
That's kind of crude. That's probably more relentless. But in talking and bringing it back to the OES, the immune system is something that is, it's not necessarily a new.
Hey, Cappy.
Yes.
Yeah, I want to hear about the immune system. But this would be a good place to have a break, because I think that's what's kind of one of the unique things that you have with the OES. So let's go to a break so we can have some more time talking about the immune system.
Okay.
All right, you're listening to Leadership Development News. You can get in touch with both Pat and Cappy. Their website is performance-dashboard.com. You hear them talking about the assessments that they have, the OES, performance-dashboard.com. And come right back. You're listening to Leadership Development News.
Welcome back to Leadership Development News. We're having an engaging conversation with the authors of a book that contains a lot of information that we're going to go into some detail around. And right now, the book is called Sail or Sink. We're kind of getting into what are the threats, what are the behaviors that an organization can share with us through its, I guess, operational immune system. And you're calling this the Organizational Effectiveness Survey. That's your trademark, OES, your assessment. So tell us a little bit about what these behaviors are that an organization starts to maybe step into that gives you, the organization assessor, an opportunity to help them redirect.
And then
Okay.
Cappy, if it helps, we left with the immune system and then go into what Kathy's talking about, the behaviors.
Yes. Yeah, that'd be great. Okay. Well, you want me to jump in?
Yeah,
Sure.
sure.
Okay. Well, first you have to look at the, like I said, the organizational immune system, and the definition of that is it's a network of people that are linked by their behaviors, those soft skills, caring relationships, and their practices, getting the work done. And they're capable of voluntarily reacting to a perceived threat. Now, what's interesting about that is that the organization's immune system detects. It doesn't protect, it detects. And that's one of the difference between the organization immune system and a human immune system a little bit. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, about the advantages and the disadvantages of an immune system. So the immune system detects any dysfunction or toxicity in the soft, caring relational behaviors, or the hard, results driven operational practices. It detects something going on. If the immune system is being attacked or weakened by some internal or external toxicity, whatever that is, the organization is usually held defenseless and against internal and those external attacks. If the organization basically is strong, then it's resilient and it can fight against those internal attacks. And what's interesting is that when those behaviors and practices are strong, and usually people kind of coast a little bit, everything's going well. But sometimes the immune system shows you've got a virus, and it's hidden, it's underneath the surface. There's a crack in the hull.
Yeah.
But leadership doesn't know about it. But if there isn't a communication between people that are underneath the water level, and the people that are in the tower up above, the captains and the leadership of the ship, then eventually they're going to start sinking. And so that's where you get into the disadvantages of an immune system.
Wow.
Of where, unlike humans that have white blood cells that attack a toxic evader, the people of the organization are the white blood cells. They're the neurotransmitters. And they often do the opposite. Instead of just, involuntarily reacting to the threat to knock it out, they basically refuse sometimes. They can refuse to interact because you've got the threat, and then you've got the thought, and then you have a voluntary reaction, which is different than the human immune system.
Can
And
you
so,
just give us an example real quick right there, Cappy? Just give us an example. What is an involuntary behavior that a human would engage in versus a voluntary behavior like a white blood cell?
okay, well, let's say that, there's a threat. Leadership says there's not going to be any more overtime. Okay. Well, there are some people that probably depend on that overtime to be able to make their bills at home. Right. So what are they going to do? Basically, if the culture is in such a way that there's they're not inclined to intervene, because one reason is there's a reluctance because they don't feel safe about voicing an opinion or making a critical remark about a coworker's idea, about what leadership just did. And so, because if they do speak up, they fear retaliation in some respects. Either it's body language or it's verbal abusive attacks, or if they call it, they used to call it, people that would rat on the organization and they fear
Whistleblower.
about lawsuits. Excuse me.
Yeah, whistleblower.
Yeah, whistleblowers. So they're fearing a lawsuit. So instead of speaking up, they shut up. They submit and resent. They submit to the threat, but in their heart, they resent being shut down and not heard and not valued. And so what happens is they usually express that seething in negative ways, such as, they squash brainstorming of ideas. They stifle competitive debates. They form passive aggressive gripes. It's the us versus them. It's the employees versus the leadership. And even Sun Tzu said, if your enemy becomes the leadership, then your vision is blurred and your blade is dulled. And, basically, even a wise guru coming in, a consultant, can't turn it around.
Yeah.
So that really puts the organization in risk. The opposite of that is when you have a strong immune system and that threat happens, that they're going to reduce the overtime, that there are people that will speak up because they feel that it's safe to do so because they've created that environment. And then what happens is they can, and what's nice about this is when the immune system is strong, people can speak up. So leaders that don't know what's happening, at a level that they're not really involved with, the brain doesn't know what's, the feet are bleeding down here. They let them, the neurotransmitters let them know that there's a connection and our feet are bleeding down here and we can't do what you want us to do. So therefore we need to figure out. So leaders can be forewarned is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And they can take steps to dispose of the toxin or the virus or the threat before it starts spreading like cancer and ultimately sinks their ship. And this happens in quite a few organizations. Like I said, you can have those people are feeling good and they're getting the results, but there could be a virus.
Right.
And it's so slight that you don't feel it. Something's wrong, but you can't name it.
Yeah. Well, that's where your assessment comes in. And
that's exactly where the OES comes in.
And I want to give, Pat a chance to kind of go. You can see how fast this is going, and maybe bring us home in a moment, just about kind of real life scenarios about some of those threats. But your metaphors are fascinating. So the immune system, we all know that it detects, but it does not project, and people then submit, and resent. And so your language is really good. I mean, you got me excited to get your book just because of the portrayal, and I think people will get it. So Pat, maybe you can tell us a little bit about just real world examples of some of these threats. I think will tie into, you mentioned there's a lot of behaviors. We won't necessarily get into all that, but people should get the book. But if you can highlight an example and maybe highlight a couple of the behaviors.
Yeah. So I'll make it very quick because I think we have till the top of the hour. Is that right?
Probably a couple minutes. Yep.
Okay. So really quickly, these if you see these in your organization, if you're feeling these in the organization, if they show up, these 7 things: saying one thing, doing another, avoiding difficult conversations, tolerating high-performing jerks, leading through fear instead of trust, failing to listen to employees, overemphasizing results while ignoring relationships. I mean, we talked about that culture, right? Relentless culture, and allowing silos, internal competition to grow. So I'll highlight one of these that is really
in the OES. Does it give scores for those? Those are great.
Well, yeah, and Yes, not
Their competencies with inside of the different functions and culture
Okay.
types.
But so
Yeah.
people could see kind of where they are on that.
yes.
Okay. Go ahead, Pat.
So I'll talk about just one of these because it's fresh on my mind from a couple of professional service firms that I worked for or did a lot of work with over the years. And one of them is an engineering firm, and engineers are all about process and operational practices, right? And it was so obvious when you sat in their meetings. They avoided, the second one I read, avoided difficult conversations.
Right.
And they went to great lengths to avoid those difficult conversations. And a lot of the coaching effort with leaders that I engaged in was teaching them,
Mm-hmm.
coaching them through the idea that, if you're constantly appeasing people and you're running from difficult conversations, you're basically avoiding conflict, right? And as Cappy pointed out, sometimes the roots of innovation are in that conflict,
Right.
and you're missing out on great opportunities. So, it's helping people reframe. Anyway, avoiding difficult conversations is one of those 7 behaviors
Yeah.
that should be a tip off.
And it's interesting. I know we only have a couple minutes left, but I want the audience to really grasp this. When we opened up the show, we talked about being in an environment that is emotionally exhausted. And so how many people really want to spend their day in difficult conversations?
Yeah.
Right. So even though we know that in a typical engineering firm, there is this avoidance of conflict and chaos because everything needs to have a semblance of order, right? A beginning, a middle, and an end. Chaos doesn't have that. Argumentation doesn't necessarily have that. And so getting people to really see the
Yeah.
beliefs they have about behaviors and recognizing that there is a silver lining, even in behaviors that are uncomfortable, can create the psychological safety for people to engage in them.
Yeah.
And that's a really beautiful lesson that you just shared there, Pat.
Well, thank you. I just got through reading a book called Culture Code. Fantastic book. And Cappy and I've talked about it a lot. There's a principle that he talks about in there where he calls it belonging.
Mm.
And people want to belong.
Yeah.
And if you engage with people in such a way that they feel like they belong in the organization,
Yeah.
it can impact huge things like turnover.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things, that all of us are involved in, it sounds like with the OES, they can name all these things. So that's kind of step one. Step two is, okay, what do I do about it? I mean, so yes, we're avoiding conflict. And I find that a lot of people, I'm sure you guys agree, they don't have the skills then to bring up stuff that has a lot of conflict. So you identified it, but then you want to somehow intervene, and that's where I'm sure you guys do it. Kathy and I do it. It's the intervene, and what is the person going to say? How are they going to say it? And how is it going to go over? And so the kind of the building of all that. And so maybe before we go, Cappy, you want to kind of bring us home to some key things about kind of what you're expecting with the book and organizations?
It's you switched on me, but I was listening
Sorry.
to that. No, that's okay. But one of the things that you talk about emotional intelligence,
Yeah.
and that's one of the things that's those soft skills. And one of the things that comes up that put organizations at risk is the lack of empathy.
Yeah.
And being able to recognize and praise people and value employees as the most valuable asset.
Yeah. That's so
And
huge. And I think
yeah.
we know, empathy power in organizations mutes empathy. So teaching our leaders how to have empathy, and there's all kind of the research that, for a leader who has empathy, how much that's going to improve performance. So we're going to bring this to a close. You've been listening to Leadership Development News. We just interviewed Pat and Cappy. Their website, performancedashboard.com. I'm sure you'll get more information about their OES and the work that they're doing. So thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Tune
Thank
in
you.
to tune up your performance. It was great talking to you guys.
Thank you.
you.